Hi, this is Joe Green, head pastor of St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church in Harrisburg, also the founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. The big story this week has been the shooting in Atlanta, and I believe it was 8 people that got shot, or maybe 8 people that got killed. I'm sorry, by gunmen who went into a couple of massage parlors and shot several people. It was very much highlighted the fact that there were several of them were Asian women. I think it was 6 of them or 4 of them. But in any event, they kept highlighting that. And then you start to hear a lot of talk about anti-Asian bias or attacks or hostility towards Asian people in America. I heard someone also say when they talked about this, the CV-19 and how it is racist to say they call it, the China virus or the Wuhan virus, and people in the mainstream media consistently say, that's racist. So I want to talk about these things. The first thing I want to do is point out the fact that Chinese is not a race. Chinese is not a race. It's an ethnicity. If you want to talk about race and you talk about, the 3 primary races that humanity is divided in, some people divided into 4. So you have Negroid, Mongoloid, and Caucasoid. And of course, Mongoloid is the term used for people of Asian descent. And, you also have some people have this other one. Anthropologists it's called Australoid. I might be saying it wrong, but it's Australialoid or something along those lines. But anyway, so if you think about it in terms of race, now, again, I would just want to say for the record, and I've said this over and over again, that race is a social construct that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist anywhere. It was created as a way to divide people. And primarily in Europe, when they started the study of race, they did it in order to perpetrate the idea of slavery, enslaving people of African descent, because they came up with the idea of, that Negro was a race and that they were less evolved because based on Charles Darwin's The Origin of the Species Through Natural Selection. The theory of evolution is based on Darwinism. And so this whole idea of race was a social construct that was created in order to divide people and to be able to oppress one group of people over another and to justify enslaving a people or colonizing certain areas of the world. So with that being said, I want to reiterate, Chinese is not a race, it's an ethnicity. And if you were to go by the whole narrative of race, Japanese, Filipino, Vietnamese, even people from Samoa are all technically considered of the same race. So it's interesting that they're really, the focus right now is on Chinese people and people from China. Maybe it's and they're saying that there's a rise in hostility against Chinese people. Now, why are they using the term racism? Even if you said, and of course, they would always accuse former President Trump of being a racist. And, when he called it the China virus or the Wuhan virus, then he was targeted because they called him a racist. They would say that was racism, right? But of course, again, Chinese is not a race. But the reason they're using the word race, and you'll hear that used over and over again, because racism is one of the trigger words used by the globalists in order to control, manipulate, and shape public opinion. I want to say that again. Racism is one of the trigger words that is used historically by the globalists in order to control, manipulate, and shape public opinion. So if you stamp the term racism on something, or something is racist, then automatically there's a negative connotation, and most people won't think past what they're being told. You'll hear this being used more and more. It's like when they had what they stamped or what they designated as the Muslim ban. They said, and of course it wasn't a Muslim ban. It was a ban of people from certain countries that were primarily Muslim nations, but they called the Muslim ban that President Trump did it because he was racist. Again, Islam, or people that are Muslims, that is not a race. That is a religion, because you can be of any ethnicity in the world and be a Muslim. You could be white and be a Muslim. There's white Muslims. There's Muslims in Europe. There's Muslims in Asia. There's Muslims in South America. There's Muslims in Africa, all over the world. And so it's ridiculous, the absurdity of people saying that if you were to ban Muslims And I'm not saying whether it was a good ban or not ban. That's not what I'm talking about today. I'm saying the absurdity of calling someone a racist because they are targeting or looking at Muslims, right? Islam is not a race. It is a ethnic, it's a religious, it's a belief system, right? And primarily, if you understand what the belief system is, and you said people that have this particular belief system we're going to look at, that's a whole different conversation than simply banning someone because of their ethnicity. That's a completely different conversation. But again, because most people don't think, they just respond and they listen, and most people are triggered, especially people of color, because they felt like they've been mistreated because of their race. And I'm using air quotes when I say race, because they feel like they've been mistreated. Anytime that word racism is thrown out there, it's a trigger word, and they automatically get in a negative or adversarial position. So anyway, let's move on. When we talk about these trigger words, and that's being used very successfully. Again, trigger words are used to manipulate, to control, and to shape public opinion. And when we talk about these words, facts don't really matter. Most people aren't deep thinkers. They're very lazy. Most people don't research. They don't think beyond what they've been told. They just regurgitate what mainstream media's talking points are, and they allow the media to tell them how to feel and what to think. But you're going to see a rise in a specific mention of China and the Chinese people in America, and I'm going to tell you why. First of all, I want you to understand that based on what the scriptures tell us, it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. The love of money. I'm going to stress that it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. Even in regards to slavery and different things, race was used to manipulate and to trigger people, right, and to control and manipulate people. But slavery was based on economics. It wasn't based on race, right? It wasn't based on skin color. It was based on economics, not based on skin color. But they perpetuated the idea of race in order to continue the practice of slavery. And even now, still to this day, slavery exists all over the world. Even in Africa, you have Africans that are enslaving other Africans. You have Asians that enslave other Asians. It happens, and it has happened since the beginning of recorded history. But anyway, you're going to see this rise in this rhetoric, and I'm going to break it down for you. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. Everything, when you look at the atrocities and the wickedness of this world, it's based on wealth and resources. Now, the people at the bottom rung people can be provoked or manipulated into being having hatred and anger towards each other. But the people at the very top are very calculated. They don't do things usually based on emotion or hatred. They are very calculated, and everything is about wealth and resources. Most of the, or all of the wars at the top level, all of the world's wars were based on wealth and resources. So when they went to colonize Africa, it was based on the resources in Africa. So they took the land, and you look at other things that occurred. Land is also considered resources, and back in the feudal days, land, of course, also represented wealth and still does to this day. Now, China is very attractive, and the reason you're going to see this rhetoric about anti-Asian or anti-Chinese hostility, because they are protecting their interests. This is the globalists, the world bankers, the global cabal. They are protecting their interests. What do I mean by that? China is very attractive because of the high level of profitability that China holds. But to say this again, China is so attractive because of the high level of profitability that it holds. What do I mean by that? So major corporations it's very profitable for them to operate in China. For instance, you have sweatshops and slave wages. So for instance, Apple had a factory in China for years, and the conditions were so horrible that they actually had to have suicide nets around the building, because the conditions were so horrible that people would literally try to commit suicide. They would throw themselves over the side, and they had these nets to catch them. Nike, for many years, and they've been busted, and they had been outed for actually having sweatshops over there where children and people were basically slaves over there. Children were working under horrible conditions, right? So the reason that China is so profitable in that area is because you can have a factory over there and pay people pennies on the dollar, and then the former administrations had trade agreements with China. The TPP is one of them, but they had trade agreements with China to where Chinese people or Chinese corporations didn't have to pay any type of taxes on bringing products over here, so they could outcompete the United States companies because they could produce something so much cheaper. Let me give you an example. Back in the days, I had friends that were in the military and they went to Vietnam, and they would be in that part of the world. And a pair of sneakers here, and I know this for a fact. There was a pair of sneakers called Top 10 Adidas, and they were about $110 or $120 back in the 80s. You could go to China and buy that same pair of sneakers, or I should say Asia, for like $12 because they could make things for pennies on the dollar. These companies could have factories over there and pay people pennies on the dollar, as opposed to coming over here and you would have to pay somebody maybe $4, $5, $6, $7 an hour. So think about this. If you could pay somebody 50 cents an hour versus paying them $7 an hour, where would you go? You would, of course, go to the place where you could pay people pennies on the dollar because your profit margin was so much greater. And so if it took, and I'm just using this for example, I'm not saying that these are the real numbers. If you had a pair of sneakers that you could sell for $100 in America, and it would take a half an hour, let's say it takes a half an hour to make the shoe because you have a factory and you have a assembly line, et cetera, you could make two pairs of sneakers in an hour. That would be $200 that you could make, right? Selling two pairs of sneakers. Now, if you could pay somebody 50 cents an hour and make $200 an hour, think about your profit margin. Now, I'm not taking in consideration, shipping it over here and packaging it and all that other stuff. I'm just saying just basic numbers. So, of course, these companies would go to China. They make huge amounts of profit. And because of the Communist Party being in control, the people had very little control over what happened over there. And, the Communist Party is a perfect tool for the globalist takeover, because communism is the epitome of what the globalists see as a utopian society. And what I mean by utopian society, it's like paradise on earth. It's like the perfect society. In their vision, these globalists, they see communism, which is based in Marxism. They see this as the perfect society because wealth and resources are controlled by a select few, primarily people in government or people that they allow to be successful. And the people have no voice over there, nor a say over how things are run. So the people can't even speak against these conditions. Like, for instance, here in America, when they would have really bad, horrible conditions, working conditions, the people could strike, or they would lobby legislators to get laws passed. So over here, you have certain laws, regulations on how people work. You have child labor laws here, which they don't have in China, or you have other types of recourse if a person is mistreated, if workers or employees are mistreated. You have like EEOC, you have all these other things that help to protect workers here. You have unions even over here. And so, over China, you don't have those same regulations. And because of that, the people have no say and no control over how things are run. Let's move it a little bit further now. So, unlike the Communist Revolution, the globalists have learned from the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. They've learned from their takeover, right? They've learned the lessons of past failures and mistakes. What do I mean by that? So when the communists took over China, tens of millions of people were killed in the process. They had the Communist Revolution, and tens of millions of people were killed. People were thrown in prison. It was very bloody. Right. And so now the globalists learned from that, and they don't want to repeat that. So now they're waging a war with Aldous Huxley, who's the author of The Brave New World, called A Revolution Without Bloodshed, or a Revolution Without Tears. It means instead of having a military takeover, they're waging a different type of revolution. So the revolution that they're doing now, the revolution without bloodshed or without tears, they're re-engineering language in order to control the thoughts and minds of people. Because in order to take over the world, how would you control 7 billion people? You can't do it by military force. So there's a different type of war that's happening. When you hear me say terms like social engineering and different things like that, they are socially engineering society in order to cause this revolution, right? So they're trying to control the re-engineering language in order to control the thoughts and the minds of people. They also have taken a page from the Nazis, how the Nazis in Germany, how they were able to seize public opinion and promote their agenda. So they're using their playbook of propaganda, where they use media and an educational system to indoctrinate generations. And so since they've been doing it for some time, for a couple of generations now, they've infiltrated the educational system with Marxist ideology. They've also really promoted this liberal thing. They've weakened the family unit. They've done other things in order to indoctrinate the generation. So many of the people now that are coming into adulthood are probably first or second or third generation of people have been under this indoctrination. And they use political correctness and newspeak, and they use that to control language. And when you control language, it helps to control thoughts. That's what social engineering is. How do you shift public opinion in a certain direction? By changing, conversations, how people can say, what people can say, and how they can talk about things. They pass things off as being second nature. And so now you hear them repeat a phrase over and over again. And Joseph Goebbels and Adolf Hitler of the Nazi Party said that if you repeat a lie long enough, it not only becomes truth, but you also believe it as well. And so they keep repeating the same things over and over again, even though it wasn't true the first time. But eventually, when they do that, the public takes it as second nature, like it must be true because they keep saying it, or all these people are saying it must be true. And like I said, most people won't drill down. They're not deep thinkers. They kind of respond and regurgitate what they've been told, and they trust mainstream media and the system so much that they just kind of go along with what is being said. Now let me bring this full circle. Now we're talking about this shooting in Atlanta, and it's going to be used as a catalyst to begin to shape the narrative that there's a large attack on Asian people in America. They will begin to highlight any negative interaction that includes an Asian person or group. I'm going to say this again. They're going to use this as the catalyst or the beginning to shape the narrative that there's a large attack on Asian people in America, and they will begin to highlight any negative interaction that includes an Asian person or group. They will use emotionalism and anecdotal evidence to prove their point. They will use emotionalism and anecdotal evidence to prove their point. Now, what do I mean by that? First of all, again, when they start saying racist or these people are mistreated, or they'll tell you a story about an Asian person that got treated horribly or really got, something bad happened to them. And they'll use that as the catalyst, and they'll say, see, this is what is happening all over the place. So they exaggerate actually things that are happening, like this shooting. It's reported that the guy didn't do it because the women were Asian. They were working in massage parlors, but because he had a sex addiction. But even so, either way, they're going to use this as a platform to promote this certain ideology, and the narrative is going to be repeated over and over again. Now, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter why he killed these women. You go to jail for murder, right? It doesn't matter if I murdered somebody because I liked them or I didn't like them. The only difference should be is if it's self-defense, that's different. If there's some other factors involved, but at the end of the day, if I go in and randomly kill someone, I should be charged with murder, and I need to be punished because of that. I shouldn't get more time because I killed someone because they're Asian, or I shouldn't get less time because I didn't, right? A person who murders someone in cold blood deserves to go to jail and be punished, right? So this whole narrative of he did it because of these Asians and this is a trend. See, it's supposed to invoke fear and emotionalism where people start to say, oh my gosh, they're just randomly shooting people from Asia, right? So this is part of their strategy. This is part of their pattern that they do all the time. Emotionalism and anecdotal evidence. Emotionalism is when they show you these images and of course it invokes anger, bitterness, fear, and all these other emotions in people. And when you can invoke those emotions, then you can manipulate people. Anecdotal evidence is they'll take one case and then they'll say, see, this is the trend right here. Again, one is too many. One person getting killed randomly is too many, but there's a difference in a pattern and one person getting killed. In a country of 300 million people, if you have a couple of people that got killed for whatever reason, that does not mean that it's some type of epidemic of this thing occurring, right? You will also see mainstream media news doing special reports on the growing hostility against Asian Americans. Mark my word, whether it's 60 Minutes or 2020 or Good Morning America, ABC News, CBS News, CNN, Maybe all of them, most likely all of them will have some form, will, in some form or fashion, will begin to do news stories, right? Special reports on the growing hostility against Asian Americans. They're going to make it seem, you're going to hear it over and over again. They're going to make it seem like this is an epidemic. It's over the top. It's just happening so much over the, this is part of their controlling speech. And then what's going to happen is any dissenting views will be considered anti-Asian or racist rhetoric and will not be accepted. They will begin canceling people from current and past anti-Asian rhetoric. So if someone makes a statement and they'll say that anti-Asian, they'll get canceled. This whole cancel culture thing. The other thing is they're going to start going back through history where people, whether it's their social media posts or whether it's some kind of speech that they did or some kind of talk, they'll start to drum it up in order to cancel people to say, hey, back 10 years ago, you made an anti-Asian statement, right? And they'll start what's known as cancel culture. Now, why is this happening? This is happening, like I said, is based on money. They're trying to frame the conversation. So if anyone tries to attribute the CV-19 to that country that begins with a C, they're going to say that that is, or that city that begins with a W, they're going to say that that's anti-Asian rhetoric, that it's politically incorrect to say, and that they have to do something about people in this type of rhetoric. And what I'm here to tell you is that the only hate speech is hate speech. If I tell you directly to go harm someone, that's hate speech. If I say, everybody right now, get in your cars and drive over to John Doe's house and shoot him, that's hate speech. That's not protected. That's not protected speech. Every other type of speech is protected under the Constitution. And there's a reason behind it, because the founding fathers recognized that if you can control speech, you can control thoughts. And if you can control thoughts, you can shape public opinion in a way that moves people into the direction you want them to move in. And so, this is how this happens historically. It will continue to happen. And so we have to have our mind and our eyes open and not fall victim to the schemes of the enemy. Until next time, peace and blessings to you.